I'm Caroline Miller, your host for Just Read It. We're a Pacific Northwest book talk show where writers in our area discuss New York Times bestsellers. And today I have two wonderful guests to discuss Brendon Slocumb's debut novel, a mystery, The Violin Conspiracy. So I want to welcome Jane Vogel Mantiri. Hi, Jane.
Hello.
Okay. And Yasmin Ruvalcaba, correct me, Yasmin.
Ruvalcaba.
Ruvalcaba. Okay. All right. We won't use your last name again, I promise. Okay. I won't mutilate it again. The book, as I said, is a mystery. The story plot line is simply a simple one. A major violin musician is headed for the Moscow competition, and he has a Stradivarius, which is stolen. So the book is about the hunt for that stolen Stradivarius. Brendon Slocumb is an African-American writer. His character, Ray McMillan, is an African-American. So I think my guests and I are going to tell you that this book has a little more depth than just a mystery, because there's family issues and there are racial issues and so forth. So let's get into it. But first, let me introduce my guests a little bit more in detail. And so, Jane, I'm going to start with you. Now, Jane is a PhD in psychology. She was a psychologist for several years, then wandered off into theater, became an actress, saw the need for getting other women's support in that field, and established a nonprofit called Age to help women of a certain age keep their foothold in the artistic world. In the meantime, being a woman of many talents, she has just brought out a new book called See Jane Run, and she is in the midst of having her life in a documentary. So welcome to the program, Jane. Tell us, please, a little bit about your book.
Thank you, Caroline, for inviting me to be here. I did just self-publish my memoir called See Jane Run, a primer on love, resilience, and the American Indo Dream. It's been a labor of love, and I identify as Indo, which is a blend of Indonesian and European. And it is a culture that is dying. The country I was born in doesn't exist anymore. And I would like to make sure that the good parts of our culture is that those parts are memorialized, chronicled, documented, and writing this memoir is just one small step in that direction.
That's great. And just a word or two about this documentary you're engaged in.
I am the subject of a documentary, which is also called See Jane Run, and an American Indo story. And it is currently, there's filming going on. We are aspiring to go to Indonesia, to my birthplace, in the next 6 to 9 months. And I'm deeply honored, feel very privileged to.
And very exciting. And I know I'm very excited for you. So good luck with that, and good luck on your book. I'm almost finished with it. I can certainly recommend it. Now, Yasmin, you are a playwright, and I know you've written more than one play, but you've got a new one out called Rancho Trinidad. Give us a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, so I've been very fortunate this past year. Well, for the last 2 years, I've been working with a local Portland theater company called the Portland Rebels. And I was invited, they commissioned a play this year. And so I kind of got to sit down with them and explore some ideas that I wanted to put on paper, put on stage. And one of the things I love about the Rebel Spring show is that it's really focused on kind of, the spring, awakening, birth, new. And so I kind of took those theme elements and really brought them to heart with this play and really kind of put out a story about how do we build new traditions when still holding on to our ancestors and our memories and our old traditions, but knowing that that might not be the path for us and kind of creating that new path. So the play really focuses on this young woman, early career, having her life, and suddenly she's not only mourning the loss of her grandfather, but she also now has this whole ranch that he left her. And her trying to figure out what do you do with this place that she used to call home, but knowing that she can't make it her forever home. And so it's been phenomenal working with the cast and the Rebels. Of one big component of their work is that they have a community chorus that is part of the production. So having kind of a community chorus come out and sing, there's music, there's dancing. It's been really, really beautiful seeing it all come to life and be a part of this. And it's just been really energizing and thinking about what do I want to work on next. And I mean, I have a long history with
I'll
Jane.
bet you do in a
I've
long
worked with
life.
Jane. Jane was the reason I moved to Portland, actually, and I'm forever grateful for that. And so seeing the work that Jane's been doing too, I'm just so motivated to keep exploring some more writing this summer. I have a play on the back burner that's been in the back burner since pre-COVID. And I've been wanting to kind of bring it back, and that's kind of my passion project for this summer. So
Well,
we'll
let
see
me
how
break
that
in
goes.
here because we've got a book to talk about. But would you
Yeah.
say your play is a comedy, a musical? How would you characterize it?
It's a little of everything, which is kind of that reality of life of, there's tears, there's laughter, there's a coming of age story, even though it's someone that's already, kind of older. So I think it really is just a real life tale.
Okay, all right. Okay, so let's get into today's book, which is Violin Conspiracy by Brendon Slocumb. It's a mystery with a musical theme, a violin artist who happens to be Black. Now, I'm going to turn to you again, Yasmin, and since you're right there on my screen, I'd like you to speak a little bit. It's a mystery, and I know when I said it had different levels, you shook your head. How did you relate to this book, and what did you feel about it being more than a mystery? Now, I guess, I don't like to call Hispanics minorities. There's so many of us, but we're going to take over the world. Yasmin, give us your take on this mystery that is more than a mystery.
Yeah, I went in with a full cold read. So I know some folks like to look up a little bit beforehand and kind of, have some knowledge. I just didn't even read a summary. I just went into it. So I was very surprised, kind of turn by turn, and kind of realizing where the story was going. And I'm still just kind of thinking about a lot of the family elements. I was very surprised to see how much kind of family history and family relationships, whether good or bad, kind of were really present in the storytelling of what it means to come across this kind of priceless, even though a price is set, instrument. And seeing also, though, how family relationships aren't as simple as good or bad. Because a lot of people, I think, could read the story and be like, oh, no, that's a very toxic relationship, or that's not how family should be with each other. But seeing that that's still family and that's still something you're going to navigate with and you're going to do the best that you can for it. So already seeing that was a big thing for me of just the family component of it. And then, of course, kind of starting experiencing those moments of the character Ray experiencing racism. The first one, even though I kind of knew where it was going, it was still just, you feel it. And it's hard. I am very very much an empath when it comes to kind of reading stories and knowing the characters. And I was so angry and I wanted to do something, and hearing that moment and also having the character navigate the realization that it was rooted in racism. It wasn't just a money thing. It wasn't just a class thing or a location thing. It really was rooted back to race and how all of those things intertwine and are intersectional within his experience.
Okay.
But yeah, I saw there was a lot to take away, definitely.
There's a big takeaway. And so I'm going to get your voice in here, Jane, because you also came to this country as an immigrant, a very young immigrant who had to do a lot of adapting and faced racial prejudice. But I want to speak to the slightly different aspect of prejudice, because what Slocumb shows us is another level, the elitism, and you with age as an actress, I don't mean age, I mean, as your organization age, as an actress, are sensitive to the kinds of prejudice, in this case, being a Black African, in an elite environment. I mean, a lot of money is involved in the competitions. And what did you feel about that? I mean, you started age. Did you sense that kind of discrimination in the so-called enlightened artistic world?
I did, very much so. And as an older woman, coming to theater very late in life, I was just shocked at my own lack of awareness. I worked for 30 years as a trauma psychologist and was not very involved in the theater. And I had this assumption that theater was very progressive. And yet there are elements of it, at least when I came into theater, that were very elitist. And come to find out that both in Portland and nationally, 85% of the stories that got told in theater were told, written, produced, directed by cis white men. And so I did start the organization Advanced Gender Equity, and I started it at the very beginning, and it continues to be, where we look at marginalization, we look at equity from an intersectional standpoint. So it's not just about age, it's also about race and ethnicity and ableism and all aspects of gender. And so I certainly could relate. And yet the other piece, which I really enjoyed about the book, was that I learned there was a transformative aspect. I'm not somebody who walks in this world in black skin, and I'm also not a musician. And so I learned new things, and yet also echoing what Yasmin is saying about being an empath, I felt the pain. The two things that really stuck with me or struck a big chord with me were resilience, and resilience in my own journey, in Ray's journey, the protagonist. But the other thing was that element, that universal element of loss, was so well articulated by the author. And even though I don't understand music the way he did, the way that he was able to describe the loss, I felt was relatable to anyone, whether you have lost a child, whether you have lost an opportunity, whether you have lost your car keys. It was very profound.
Well, which brings me to the point, Yasmin, that dig deep enough, and we're all kind of the same. Did you share Jane's sense of that loss? Yasmin?
Yes. Yeah, I think it was interesting putting it in that perspective, Jane, because I feel like I felt it, but I didn't know how to put it into words, that loss element. And it was the moment where he was talking about how he's accomplished all of this. Once he's in the big competition, I still don't know how to properly pronounce that competition in Russia.
Moscow. Moscow competition.
Yes. But once he, placed and was able to get all these accolades because of his work, it was this kind of double-sided element of I was able to do it with this instrument that's not my family core, that isn't mine, but he was still missing that sense of it. And there was something there that makes me think about kind of the ancestry and the stories we bring along with us, and that everything I get to do because of little things that my grandparents did or because of the stories and moments they lived. There was something there that I was really pulling with me. And it actually had me thinking about my grandmothers, who I lost both of them at a young age. And I feel like a lot of my work is influenced alongside these matriarchal figures that I never got to fully know and understand the way I would have if they were still with us today. So kind of having that loss of knowledge and story and just kind of love that I know would have carried with them was something I was really stuck thinking about when reading.
Let me pick up on that, because first of all, I want to say that there's another level, which for me was revelatory, and that is, how fierce being an artist is in some of these, it's quite cutthroat no matter what race you're in. But let's pick up your family thing. And I wanted to get both of your reactions. I didn't understand the family interaction. It was kind of vicious, of course. They all wanted to get a hold of the Stradivarius. Well, everybody has, if there's an inheritance, there's a family dispute. But I didn't understand the role of the mother. The grandmother was so loving, and she gave her grandson all this encouragement, and then unwittingly a Stradivarius, which was given to her relative, maybe her father, when he was a slave. And another element we haven't brought in there is a white family that was the slave owners generation. They want that Stradivarius. So that's another level to this book. But what I wanted to ask you both was, how did you feel? If I had to find a flaw in this book, it was I could find no motive for the mother's hostility to her own son or his success. Did either of you, let's start with you, Yasmin, did you make any sense out of that?
I feel like at the beginning, I felt this resentment towards the relationship and the way, and my immediate response was, why doesn't he just leave all that behind?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I started thinking about familial responsibility and kind of what that entails, especially for cultures of color. And obviously, I don't know what it means to be a Black man in this country with a legacy of, slavery in the family, which already adds so many additional layers. But I did think, of course, about my immigrant kind of background and the fact that when I was growing up, the first thing I always thought about was, how can I make sure that my family continues to prosper? And my successes aren't just my successes, but they're my family's as well. And when I decided to not go to law school and instead pursue some sort of career in arts, my parents' first reaction was, well, you better not come beg us for some money. And they didn't mean it in a negative way, but there was that fear of all the work they've done. They didn't want that to get lost and have me not be able to succeed the way they would dream that I would. So there is these kind of double layers to it, definitely.
That's a very good insight. Jane, what's your opinion on that?
I had very strong feelings about the role of the mother. And if I could have coffee with Brendon Slocumb, I would really love to ask him about that, because when I read his acknowledgments, one of the first people he acknowledged was his mother, who he said supported him in every way possible. I also, when I was reading the acknowledgments, he did such due diligence around his research, bringing together a lot of experts. I think the one piece that was missing was I would have liked to have him bring in perhaps a psychologist.
Prejudice.
Yes, imagine that. Because I, from my own personal experience, as well as 30 years of practice with families of all backgrounds and persuasions, the role of the mother was portrayed as very one note. And I was curious about what his motivation was for portraying this woman as the antithesis of his own mother. And I felt that as much as he researched what it means to be a prodigy, a musical prodigy, what it means to have art theft happen, really what was missing for me, that mother was physically, mentally, and emotionally abusive to him long term. And to have that kind of trauma occur by not a stranger, but the person who is supposed to be your protector, who is supposed to be your lifeline, that has an impact. And not all people respond the same way to trauma. But that trauma doesn't get erased. And what I loved about his book was that it was so relatable. The piece that is missing is that those of us who have experienced abuse by a family member, there wasn't the ability to validate where we put that trauma.
Very good, very good. Well, we have run past the normal time here because the conversation is so interesting. We have Yasmin's perspective is possibly, which ameliorates that we've got a mother here who feels she has to be strong, single parent, and everybody has to contribute. But Jane, I kind of have that same vacuum. And Slocumb is going to be our guest somewhere down later this year. So I'm going to send him this tape and maybe we can get an answer to our question. Well, okay, quick question. I want you to, I presume you both recommend the book and to our readers. What I'd like you to do, though, is give us a rep again on your creative work and finish up with a little spotlight on you. And I'll start with you, Jane, since I'm looking at you. Again, the name of your book and a brief summary of it, what it's about.
The name of my book is called See Jane Run, a primer on love, resilience, and the American Indo Dream. All the proceeds benefit AIDS, and it is a compilation of stories that make up the tapestry of my life.
And it's I can't tell you folks how readable it is. And now, Yasmin, your play and what you want us to know about it.
Thank you. So yes, like I said, I was very honored to be commissioned by the Portland Rebels to write Rancho Trinidad, which is still up for this month. I think we have a couple shows still left that are part of the touring, but hopefully more to do with it later. And like I said, I'm hoping to get a couple more pieces out there. And I also want to shout out Age and the wonderful work they're doing over there, because I worked there for 5 years and I love them and love the work that's happening. So just want to make sure and shout them out twice.
Okay. And you do recommend the book? Did I put words in your mouth?
Yeah. No, definitely.
All right. I want to thank my two wonderful guests. And boy, they certainly enlightened me, showed me some things about Slocumb's book that I had not thought about, puzzled over, but not thought about. My dear viewers, I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. I hope you'll consider subscribing. We only produce every 2 months. You don't want to miss good discussions like this. We don't sell your name. We don't do anything. You can drop in or off as you wish. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed your time with Yasmin and Jane and me today, and that you'll run right out and buy Slocumb's The Violin Conspiracy. Thank you again.